When we think of grand-scale financial collapse, we imagine lines of code, high-frequency algorithms, and sterile skyscrapers on Wall Street. We assume the greatest heists are born in boardrooms. We are wrong. The most sophisticated fraud in history did not begin with a server or a spreadsheet. It began with a handful of common, unremarkable dirt. In 1993, David Walsh, a bankrupt stock promoter from Calgary, turned his eyes away from the markets and toward a patch of jungle in Busang, Borneo. It was an isolated, suffocating expanse of green, miles from any financial center. Walsh secured the exploration rights to this remote terrain, bringing in a geologist and a field manager to scour the earth. On paper, it was a desperate gamble in a forgotten corner of the world. But deep within that dense, tangled canopy, something was being planted in the soil. The stage was set for a miracle, or, as the world would soon discover, a masterfully constructed fiction. The dirt did not hold gold, yet it held the power to bring the global financial system to its knees. The first assay report arrived like a thunderclap in a quiet room. Michael de Guzman delivered the numbers, and they were impossible. 30 million ounces of gold buried beneath the Borneo brush. The news traveled through the industry corridors, turning skeptical investors into believers overnight. Then, the reports kept coming, and each one defied the last. 70 million ounces. Then, 100. The math suggested a deposit of 200 million ounces, a quantity that shattered every geological precedent. The market ignited. Bre-X stock began its vertical climb, leaping from 30 cents to over $200 per share. Institutional giants like Lehman Brothers and JP Morgan scrambled to secure a piece of the action, funneling massive capital into the project. The company valuation surged to $6 billion. David Walsh left his life of debt behind, settling into a luxury estate in the Bahamas as the world watched in awe. It was no longer just an exploration project. It was a gold rush of historic proportions. Every drill hole seemed to confirm the dream. The numbers were perfect, the data was consistent, and the investors were blinded by the promise of infinite wealth. The fever was absolute. The miracle was a lie, manufactured by hand in the suffocating heat of the Indonesian jungle. Michael de Guzman did not find gold in the earth, he brought it with him. He controlled the entire chain of custody, insisting that drill cores be pulverized on site before any testing could occur. This was the trap. Before the samples were sealed for transport, he would secretly introduce fine grains of gold into the mixture. It began with the simple, desperate destruction of his own wedding ring, filed down into metallic dust. When that was not enough, he escalated the deception. He spent $60,000 of his own money to purchase river gold, dumping the dust into the bags to keep the assays consistently high. Every lab report that stunned Wall Street was the result of this manual contamination. Analysts in distant offices fed these fraudulent numbers into their sophisticated models, unaware that their entire financial thesis rested on a metal file and a pouch of stolen dust. The global system was not defeated by a complex algorithm, but by the physical act of adding grit to dirt. It was a masterpiece of low-tech manipulation hidden in plain sight, turning a worthless patch of jungle into the greatest financial fiction of the decade. The illusion hit its limit the moment the Indonesian government stepped in. They demanded a partner with the weight to turn a dream into a functional mine, and they chose Freeport-McMoRan. The American giant arrived in the jungle with a different set of protocols and a cold, professional skepticism. They did not care about the hype. They cared about the geology. As the Freeport teams unloaded their own drilling rigs into the clearing, the air in the camp changed. The routine that Michael de Guzman had controlled for years was suddenly shattered by the arrival of independent observers. These were not local laborers or distant analysts. These were veteran engineers who spent their lives measuring the earth. They marked their own drill sites within feet of the original holes. They established their own chain of custody, locking samples in steel containers that no one else could touch. Every sound of a heavy drill bit biting into the rock felt like a countdown. The camp, once a sanctuary of manufactured success, became a pressure cooker. De Guzman watched from the edge of the clearing as the new rigs pushed deeper than he ever had. The margin for error had vanished. The house of cards was no longer isolated in the jungle. It was under the microscope of a corporation that would settle for nothing less than the truth. The final core sample arrived from the lab in a plain, sealed tube. It was not the heavy, gold-flecked promise the world expected. It was just rock. Gray, lifeless, and utterly barren. Freeport executives gathered in the cramped site office, their faces lit by the harsh glare of a single overhead bulb. They laid the new core side by side with the old data sheets. The discrepancy was absolute. There was no motherlode. There was no miracle. There was only millions of dollars of industrial equipment wasted on a hollow, worthless patch of dirt. The silence in the room was heavier than the jungle humidity outside. A senior geologist ran his thumb over the stone, confirming what the chemical assay already stated. The earth here had never seen gold. The fraud was not just exposed, it was dismantled. Panic rippled through the chain of command as the implications hit home. $6 billion in market valuation was pinned to a lie that had just been physically erased by the drill bit. Phones began to ring, urgent and frantic, as the truth prepared to travel from the jungle clearing to the trading floors of New York and Toronto. The era of the gold mine was over. The era of the investigation had just begun. The walls were closing in, and the executives were waiting. They demanded an explanation for the empty drill cores, and there was only one man who could provide it. Michael de Guzman climbed into the helicopter, his face a mask of calm that defied the reality of a collapsing fraud. The rotors thundered, lifting the machine above the canopy of the Borneo jungle. For 20 minutes, the world was nothing but the steady, rhythmic beat of the engine and the vast, suffocating green below. Then, the cabin door opened. Whether by accident or design, the motion was swift. He plunged 800 feet into the dense, unforgiving growth of the rainforest. The pilot kept flying, the empty seat a silent witness to a sudden, violent exit. 4 days later, a search team recovered a body, mangled and ravaged by the jungle heat and scavengers. It was identified by dental records, and the investigation closed with a verdict of suicide. But the doubt remained. Critics pointed to the millions in stock options he had liquidated just days before the fall. Had he truly ended his life in a moment of desperation? Or was this the final, brutal move of a master manipulator? The man was gone, but the mystery of his final act only deepened the chaos left behind. The news broke like a shockwave across the trading floors of Toronto and New York. Bre-X stock, once a titan of the mining world, began a terminal descent. On the monitors, the numbers bled red, falling faster than the systems could process. From $280, the price plummeted to pennies, then vanished entirely. $6 billion of investor wealth simply ceased to exist. Pension funds, massive institutional banks, and individual savers were wiped out in a single session. The mirage of the motherlode had finally dissolved, leaving only the cold reality of empty ledgers. As the dust settled, the legal machinery ground into motion. David Walsh retreated to his estate, insisting on his own ignorance until his death a year later. John Felderhoff stood trial, facing the weight of the global collapse, only to walk away with an acquittal. There was no recovery, no restitution, and no one left to answer for the mountain of stolen value. The scale of the fraud was monumental, yet the justice system provided no closure for those whose futures were liquidated overnight. It was a masterclass in deception that left the financial world staring at the wreckage, wondering how a simple lie had managed to topple the most sophisticated institutions on the planet. The Bre-X scandal proved a brutal law. A ledger holds value only if the raw data feeding it remains pure. Sophisticated models and institutional giants collapsed because the input was dirt. The system trusted the sample, but the sample was a lie constructed by a file and river dust. Now the money is gone, the companies are broken, and the legal system has moved on. Yet one variable remains unsolved. Michael de Guzman liquidated millions in options days before the fall. He boarded a helicopter and vanished into the jungle canopy. Was the body in the ravine his, or did the architect of the fraud walk away into the shadows? The mine was empty, the gold was fake, but the doubt remains real. In a world promising guaranteed wealth, remember that the most dangerous asset is not a volatile stock, but a story too perfect to question.